cornered. Under arrest.
You'll find me. You'll find my guns.
There's multiple guns.
I got a steep.
King Harris, the son of rapper T.I., has just faced the kind of brutal reality check that not even all his fame, family legacy, or flashy lifestyle could shield him from. For years, he carried himself with reckless pride, flaunting money, cars, and an untouchable attitude on social media, almost as if the rules of the world didn't apply to him. But when the prison doors shut behind him, the game changed instantly. The attack he suffered inside was not just another scuffle. It was violent, humiliating, and powerful enough to send shockwaves across the internet. The footage of the incident quickly spread online, showing the young Harris not as the untouchable star he once claimed to be, but as a vulnerable inmate who found out the hard way that inside those walls, status and privilege mean nothing. This entire downfall has been brewing for years, with red flags scattered across King's public life. He cultivated an image of being invincible, calling himself a street king while living off the privileges that came with being the son of a hip-hop legend. His arrogance showed in reckless driving, social media antics, and constant brushes with the law. What happened in October 2024 was the clearest sign that his lifestyle was spiraling toward disaster. Driving his BMW out of a gas station, King nearly collided with a police car. For anyone else, that would have been an instant wake-up call. For King, it was just another example of how deeply he believed he was immune to consequences. But reality started catching up fast. The cops immediately noticed the smell of weed in the car, and soon after, they found a gun strapped to his hip. King Harris wasn't just a celebrity's son making a careless mistake. He was actively daring the law, walking around as though carrying weapons and drugs was nothing more than a fashion accessory. To make matters worse, when they ran his name, an old warrant popped up. He had failed to appear in court for a series of violations: speeding, DUI, and driving with a suspended license. Skipping out on his responsibilities only deepened the picture of someone living in denial, acting like the rules simply didn't exist for him. The arrest that followed became one of the most humiliating moments of his life. The footage captured everything. The young man who once flexed on Instagram with expensive cars, gold chains, and private jets now sat handcuffed in the back of a police car. There was no shouting, no resistance. Strangely, he appeared calm, as if he already knew this was the moment where all the mistakes of his past had finally come to collect their due. Even the officers commented on his cooperative behavior, which was shocking for someone who had built his entire persona around being untouchable. That calmness wasn't strength, it was defeat. The video went viral in hours, with millions of people watching his public image crumble in real time. Online reactions poured in. Many laughed at his downfall, calling it karma for his arrogance, while a smaller group sympathized with him, suggesting that he was just a young man lost in his own hype. But sympathy faded quickly as more details surfaced about the sheer recklessness he had shown in his everyday life. People pointed to his long string of bad decisions and concluded that it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. The arrest was just the beginning. When the sentencing came, things took an even darker turn. Inside the prison, King Harris was no longer the son of T.I. or the kid with thousands of followers. He was just another inmate, stripped of privilege and surrounded by men who didn't care about his fame. Within hours of being placed in custody, he was attacked. The leaked footage was disturbing, showing him being thrown around, beaten, and humiliated. What made the situation worse was how quickly that footage spread, transforming his personal nightmare into public entertainment. The internet dissected every second of the clip, speculating whether the attack was random or calculated. Some suggested jealousy played a role. Other inmates may have resented his flashy background, his cocky behavior, and the way he carried himself like he was better than everyone else. Others whispered about deeper motives, pointing to possible connections and long-standing grudges that had nothing to do with him personally, but everything to do with his family name. Either way, the attack wasn't just about physical violence, it was a message. Being the son of a legend offered no protection inside those walls. This wasn't the life King expected. He had been warned countless times, especially by his father, that the streets and the system would eventually swallow him if he didn't change his ways. T.I. himself had faced prison before and tried to steer his son away from the same mistakes. But warnings mean nothing when arrogance runs deep. King thought he was different. He thought the Harris name would shield him. Instead, it only made him a bigger target. The attack shattered his illusion of power and exposed him as just another young man who believed his own hype until reality came crashing down. The public's fascination with his downfall only fueled the story further. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags, memes, and endless debates. Some people insisted that he was only getting what he deserved for flaunting wealth and privilege while pretending to live a street life. Others argued that he was a victim of a toxic culture that glorified dangerous behavior until it consumed him completely. Regardless of which side people took, one fact became undeniable. King Harris was no longer in control of his own narrative. His life had turned into a spectacle, and the world was watching. The first part of his downfall, from reckless driving and a humiliating arrest to a violent attack in prison, has painted a picture of a young man who thought he was invincible but quickly found out that reality doesn't play favorites. The question now is whether this attack will serve as the wake-up call he desperately needs, or if it's just the beginning of an even darker spiral that could destroy not only his future, but also the reputation of the Harris family. The prison attack on King Harris did not just expose the dangers of his reckless behavior. It also revealed the fragility of fame, legacy, and the illusion of power. When the footage of the assault hit the internet, it was no longer just about a young man making bad choices. It became a story of betrayal, resentment, and something much bigger happening behind the scenes. The leaked video didn't look like a random fight between inmates. It looked organized. The way King was cornered, the force used against him, and the timing, all of it hinted at a setup. Whispers began to circulate online and inside the prison that this wasn't just a case of a spoiled celebrity's son rubbing people the wrong way. This was a calculated move, possibly orchestrated by those with deeper motives. Some suggested it was prison gangs who saw an opportunity to make a statement. Others speculated that it was about punishing the Harris family name itself, as if King had inherited not just fame, but enemies too. For King, the timing couldn't have been worse. He had just been sentenced, still adjusting to the brutal reality of prison life, when the attack happened. Normally, high-profile inmates are given a certain level of protection, but somehow he ended up in a situation where his guard was down. Questions quickly followed. How could the son of a rap icon, a young man whose every move was tracked by media, be left vulnerable enough to be beaten so severely within hours of being locked up? Was it incompetence by the prison authorities? Was it negligence, or was there something more sinister, like an intentional blind eye being turned so that the attack could take place? Theories spread like wildfire. Some insiders hinted at a mysterious inmate with outside connections who allegedly pulled strings to orchestrate the assault. The rumors claimed this person had been waiting for King to land in prison, and once he did, the opportunity to strike was too good to pass up. Whether those whispers are true or not, they gained traction online, fueling speculation that King's attack was not just a personal consequence but part of a bigger game. For the public, this added a whole new layer to the story. It wasn't simply about a reckless young man paying for his arrogance. It was about conspiracy, vendetta, and a high-profile family's legacy being dragged into chaos. Meanwhile, the Harris family found themselves at the center of unwanted attention. For T.I., who built his career on overcoming his own struggles with the law and reinventing himself, watching his son spiral into this disaster was heartbreaking. Fans questioned his role as a father, with many online blaming him for not being strict enough or failing to set the right example. But others pushed back, pointing out that T.I. had openly warned his son countless times, publicly and privately, to straighten out before it was too late. He knew firsthand what prison could do, and he tried to steer King away from it. But in the end, no matter how much guidance a parent offers, it's the choices of the child that determine the outcome. The pressure wasn't just on T.I. Pamela Warner, King's mother, was also devastated. To see her son beaten on camera and humiliated in front of the world was more than just painful. It was a living nightmare. The tears weren't only for King's physical injuries, but for the loss of a dream, the hope that her son could rise above the mistakes and immaturity of his youth to become something greater. The attack symbolized not just King's downfall, but the crumbling of a family's vision for his future. Online, the reaction was relentless. Hashtags like #FreeKing, Harris and #PrayForKing began trending, with fans and critics alike weighing in. Some argued that the attack showed the dangers of mixing fame with street life, pointing out how celebrities often glorify recklessness only to suffer the consequences later. Others mocked him, calling the assault well-deserved karma for years of arrogance and entitlement. Memes flooded timelines, painting King as a cautionary tale rather than a victim. Social media amplified every angle, making sure the story remained at the center of attention. The prison system itself came under fire. How could footage from inside a supposedly secure facility leak so quickly and spread so widely? Was it a failure of control, or was someone inside complicit in making sure the world saw King's humiliation? Theories of cover-ups and hidden agendas surfaced, suggesting that the attack wasn't just allowed to happen, but was broadcast intentionally to send a message. Who that message was for remains unclear. Was it meant for King, his family, or the public at large? Whatever the case, it transformed his situation into something much bigger than a personal misstep. The fallout extended beyond King's physical injuries and online embarrassment. The Harris legacy itself began to fracture under the weight of this scandal. T.I.'s reputation as a father and mentor came under scrutiny. For years, he worked to present himself as a reformed man who overcame the streets, a family man with wisdom to pass on. But the public narrative quickly turned, with headlines asking if he had failed as a parent, and if King's collapse was proof that money and fame can't fix deep-rooted recklessness. Even though T.I. did everything in his power to guide his son, the public only saw the outcome, a boy in prison, beaten and humiliated. At the same time, the attack sparked an important debate. Was King truly to blame for everything that happened to him? Or was he also a victim of a larger culture that encouraged him to act out? Growing up in the spotlight, with cameras on him from childhood, he was shaped by an environment that rewarded drama, flash, and controversy. Social media only amplified it, with likes and attention pouring in whenever he flexed cars, jewelry, or reckless behavior. In many ways, he wasn't just acting out for himself, he was feeding an audience that demanded more. When the consequences finally hit, the same audience that cheered him on turned into a mob that ridiculed him. Through all of this, one thing became clear: King Harris had lost control of his story. He was no longer the one posting videos, flexing wealth, and creating his own image. Now, the videos being shared were of his downfall, his humiliation, and his pain. The same internet that once boosted his ego was now dissecting his collapse, turning it into entertainment. It was no longer just about him as an individual, it was about what his story represented, the clash between fame and reality, privilege and consequence, arrogance and humility, the attack in prison was more than just violence, it was a symbol. It represented the breaking point of a life lived on the edge. A dramatic turning of the tide where the world stopped seeing him as a celebrity's son and started seeing him as another fallen figure consumed by his own choices. And the scariest part, this was just the beginning of a much darker chapter. After the attack, the real chaos began. The footage of King Harris being beaten in prison may have shocked the world, but what unfolded afterward was even more disturbing. Behind the scenes, forces were moving that could not only destroy King's future, but also tarnish the entire Harris family legacy. It wasn't just about one violent moment anymore. It was about power, influence, and the dangerous game of reputation in a society that thrives on scandal. The brutality King endured was public, but the real story was happening in the shadows. Whispers of cover-ups, hidden agendas, and calculated schemes began to surface. Theories poured in from every corner. Was this attack the result of King's own arrogance, or was someone deliberately trying to dismantle his family's name? The Harris dynasty, built over decades of hard work, was now under fire. T.I., long regarded as the King of the South, had built his empire from the ground up. He had lived the street life, faced prison himself, and then rebranded as a man of family, business, and music. Now, his own son's downfall threatened to undo years of carefully built credibility. The media wasted no time in pointing fingers, with some accusing T.I. of being a failed father who couldn't control his child. But in truth, T.I. had been warning King for years. He had said it publicly. If you keep walking this path, the streets will eat you alive. Sadly, his prophecy had come true. For the world, this was another chance to judge him, but for T.I., it was the painful reality of watching his son spiral despite every effort to guide him. For Pamela Warner, King's mother, the pain was even more personal. Watching the video of her son's humiliation was unbearable. Every parent hopes their child will avoid the pitfalls of recklessness, but Pamela now had to face the world knowing that all the advice, all the support, and all the protection still couldn't stop King from making choices that led him here. She wasn't just grieving for her son's injuries, she was grieving for the collapse of the future she once imagined for him. This wasn't the legacy she wanted, but it was the one being written right before her eyes. Meanwhile, the internet turned King's tragedy into a global spectacle. Some people demanded justice for the attack, while others mocked him as entitled and spoiled. Hashtags like #FreeKingHarris and #SpoiledKing trended side by side, reflecting the deep divide in public opinion. His critics saw the entire situation as a lesson. Money and fame cannot protect you from the consequences of arrogance. His supporters, however, argued that he was just a young man making mistakes in the public eye, mistakes that others his age make privately without cameras broadcasting their every move. The debate raged on, and with every new comment, King's story grew larger than his life. He had become a symbol, not just an individual. As the days went on, the conspiracy theories gained strength. Many believed the attack was not random at all. The timing, the brutality, and the leaked footage suggested coordination. Some even claimed there were factions inside the prison with outside influence, determined to send a message by targeting King. Whether that message was aimed at the Harris family, the hip-hop world, or society at large, no one could agree. But one thing was clear: the beating was more than personal. It carried a weight that went beyond a single inmate. It was a demonstration, a warning, and possibly a calculated strike against the Harris name. For King, the humiliation was total. He had spent years projecting an image of being untouchable, flexing on Instagram, showing off his cars, his wealth, and his connections. Now, those same people who once cheered him were sharing the footage of his downfall. The internet, which once fueled his ego, had turned into his biggest enemy. Every meme, every joke, every harsh comment chipped away at his public identity. He wasn't seen as powerful anymore. He was seen as a fallen prince, stripped of everything, left to face the harsh reality of his actions. This moment of collapse left one question hanging in the air: could King Harris bounce back? Redemption stories have always captured the public's imagination. People love to watch a star fall, but they also love to see one rise again. The question was whether King had the strength, maturity, and humility to turn this disaster into a turning point. For now, it didn't look promising. His reputation was in tatters, his family was under intense scrutiny, and his future was uncertain. If he wanted to rebuild, it would take more than apologies or statements. It would take a complete transformation. But transformation doesn't come easy when you're already caught in a cycle of ego and self-destruction. At the same time, the bigger picture loomed. King's downfall wasn't just about him. It was about the system. The prison attack, the leaked footage, the way the internet devoured every detail. It all pointed to a society addicted to scandal and drama. King became another pawn in a cycle where young celebrities are celebrated for reckless behavior, only to be destroyed when the consequences hit. The media benefited, the internet thrived, and the system carried on. Whether King learned his lesson or not, the machinery of scandal would simply move on to the next headline. Still, for the Harris family, the damage was personal and lasting. T.I.'s carefully built reputation as a mentor and father was shaken. Pamela's heartbreak was raw, and King himself was left scarred, both physically and emotionally, with the weight of the world's judgment pressing down on him. What had once been a story of privilege and power had become a cautionary tale about arrogance, fame, and the brutal truth that no one is above the rules. In the end, the prison attack was not the conclusion of King Harris's story. It was the turning point. The world is waiting to see whether he collapses completely under the weight of his mistakes, or rises from the ashes with a newfound sense of purpose. Will this be the end of the Harris dynasty's shine, or will it be the beginning of a redemption arc powerful enough to silence critics? The answer remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. King Harris is no longer just another celebrity's son. He is the center of a storm that has captivated millions, and his next move could decide whether he becomes a legend of redemption or a permanent symbol of wasted potential.